The interrogation room is quiet and controlled. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. A camera records every movement. Across the table sits Jodi Arias. Her posture is relaxed. Her tone is steady. Detectives begin with routine questions about her relationship with Travis Alexander. She answers without hesitation. Her voice remains calm. At times she smiles. The expressions do not match the subject of the conversation. Investigators note the contrast. It is not emotional. It is observational. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because what happens next reveals how this system truly works. The case begins in June 2008. Travis Alexander is found dead inside his home in Mesa, Arizona. The scene is violent. He has multiple stab wounds. There is a gunshot wound to the head. His throat is cut. Blood is present in several areas of the bathroom. Investigators immediately recognize the level of force involved. This is not consistent with a sudden or accidental act. It suggests sustained violence. Initial interviews focus on people close to the victim. Jodi Arias is identified as a former partner. She lives in another state but has traveled to Arizona in the past. Detectives contact her. During early conversations, she denies being present at the time of the killing. She states she has not seen Travis Alexander for some time. Her statements are recorded and compared. There are inconsistencies in small details. Nothing definitive yet, but enough to keep her on the list of interest. As the investigation continues, forensic evidence begins to define the timeline. Digital data is recovered from a camera found in the home. The memory card contains images. Some are ordinary. Others are critical. Time-stamped photographs show Travis Alexander alive shortly before the estimated time of death. Additional images show a sequence that places Jodi Arias at the scene. The camera captures moments that narrow the window of the crime. Investigators now have a direct connection. Jodi Arias is brought in for a formal interrogation. The environment is controlled. Detectives follow standard procedure. They present questions in a structured way. At first, she maintains her denial. She states she was not in the house. She suggests that unknown individuals may be responsible. Her tone remains even. She does not show visible distress. At several points, she smiles while describing events that involve violence. Detectives do not interrupt this behavior. They observe and document. The questioning continues for hours. Breaks are taken. Water is offered. The pace remains steady. Detectives begin to introduce pieces of evidence. They reference the camera. They mention timestamps. They outline the timeline based on forensic analysis. Jodi Arias listens. Her responses shift slightly. She pauses longer before answering. She adjusts her posture. The calm tone remains, but the structure of her narrative begins to change. She introduces a new version of events. In this account, she states that two unknown intruders entered the home. She claims they attacked Travis Alexander. She describes herself as a witness who feared for her life. Detectives ask for details. The description lacks consistency. Specific elements do not align with physical evidence from the scene. There are no signs of forced entry. The pattern of injuries does not support multiple attackers. Investigators note these gaps. As pressure increases, the interrogation becomes more focused. Detectives revisit earlier statements. They compare them directly with new claims. Contradictions become clear. Jodi Arias acknowledges parts of the evidence but attempts to reframe their meaning. She does not show signs of panic. Instead, she maintains composure. The occasional smile remains. Investigators begin to understand this behavior as controlled rather than emotional. Eventually, a third version of events is presented. In this account, she admits to being present during the killing. She claims self-defense. She states that Travis Alexander became aggressive. She describes a struggle. Detectives examine this claim against the forensic record. The number of wounds, the severity, and the sequence of injuries do not fully support a defensive action. The evidence suggests a prolonged attack rather than a brief struggle. Throughout the interrogation, the pattern is consistent. Each time evidence is introduced, the narrative shifts. The calm demeanor does not change. The smiles appear at moments that do not align with the gravity of the discussion. Investigators interpret this as an attempt to manage perception. It is not spontaneous. It is deliberate. By the end of the session, detectives have a clearer understanding of the strategy being used. The calmness is not an indicator of innocence. It is a method of control. The changing stories are not confusion. They are adjustments in response to evidence. The interrogation does not produce a single consistent account. Instead, it reveals a sequence of evolving explanations, each shaped by what can be proven. The case moves forward with this foundation. Evidence, not demeanor, defines the direction. The photographs, the forensic findings, and the inconsistencies in statements become central to the prosecution. The interrogation has served its purpose. It has documented the shifts. It has established the contradictions. It has shown how behavior in the room can differ from the reality of the crime. This is the first stage of a process that continues beyond the interrogation room. It moves into courtrooms, into expert analysis, and into the structure of the United States justice system. What appears controlled on the surface is examined against measurable facts. And in this case, those facts do not change. The investigation transitions from the interrogation room to the courtroom. Prosecutors organize the evidence into a clear sequence. The timeline is reconstructed using digital records, forensic analysis, and physical evidence from the scene. The photographs recovered from the camera become a central element. They establish presence, timing, and proximity. Each image is examined in detail. Experts verify metadata. The sequence is consistent with the estimated time of death. Forensic testimony focuses on the nature of the injuries. Medical examiners describe the number and placement of wounds. They explain the force required. The analysis does not support a brief struggle. It indicates repeated actions over a sustained period. Blood evidence is presented to map movement within the bathroom. Patterns on the floor and walls show direction and position. These findings are technical and specific. They are not open to broad interpretation. The defense presents a claim of self-defense. They argue that the actions occurred during a perceived threat. This claim is evaluated against the physical evidence. Prosecutors highlight inconsistencies between the claim and the injury patterns. The sequence of wounds, including the gunshot and the cutting of the throat, is examined in context. Experts explain that the order and severity do not align with a spontaneous defensive response. Recorded statements from the interrogation are introduced. Jurors observe the progression of explanations given by Jodi Arias. The initial denial, the claim of intruders, and the final assertion of self-defense are presented in order. The changes are clear. Each version is compared against established facts. The calm demeanor and occasional smiling are visible in the footage. The court does not interpret demeanor as proof of guilt, but it provides context for evaluating credibility. Cross-examination focuses on consistency. Prosecutors ask direct questions about the changes in narrative. They reference specific details from earlier statements. The responses are measured. The structure of the answers remains controlled. However, the differences between versions are documented. The jury is instructed to consider reliability, not presentation. The trial process is methodical. Evidence is introduced, challenged, and verified. Expert witnesses explain technical findings in clear terms. Digital forensics specialists confirm the integrity of the photographs. Medical experts describe the injuries without speculation. Each component supports the overall timeline. The sequence does not rely on a single source. It is built from multiple independent analyses. Public attention increases as the trial continues. Media coverage focuses on the unusual aspects of the case, including the recorded interrogation. Despite this attention, courtroom procedures remain structured. The judge enforces rules on admissibility and relevance. Arguments are limited to what can be supported by evidence. Emotional framing is restricted. The process is designed to maintain objectivity. The jury deliberates after both sides present their cases. They review the timeline, the forensic findings, and the recorded statements. The decision is based on consistency between evidence and explanation. In this case, the physical evidence does not support the claim of self-defense. The changing narratives reduce credibility. The sequence of events, as established by data and analysis, remains stable. A verdict is reached. Jodi Arias is found guilty of first-degree murder. The decision reflects the weight of the evidence rather than behavior observed during questioning. The legal standard requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecutors meet that standard through documentation and expert testimony. The interrogation plays a role, but it is one part of a larger structure. Sentencing follows in a separate phase. The court considers aggravating and mitigating factors. Testimony is presented to address the impact of the crime. Legal guidelines determine the range of possible outcomes. The process is formal and regulated. Each step follows established procedures within the United States justice system. The case illustrates how investigations rely on measurable facts. Behavior during interrogation can draw attention, but it does not determine outcome on its own. Evidence must be verified, tested, and presented in a structured way. In this instance, digital records, forensic analysis, and documented inconsistencies form the basis of the conclusion. The system moves from observation to proof, and from proof to judgment. After the verdict, the process moves into sentencing and confinement. The court evaluates statutory guidelines and prior rulings. Aggravating factors are weighed against mitigating circumstances. The outcome reflects both the severity of the crime and the standards required by law. Jodi Arias receives a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The decision concludes the trial phase but begins a different part of the system. She is transferred into the custody of the Arizona Department of Corrections. Intake procedures are structured and consistent. Personal property is cataloged. Identification is assigned. Medical and psychological evaluations are conducted. These steps determine classification and housing. The process is administrative, not discretionary. Within the facility, daily life follows a fixed schedule. Movement is controlled. Meals occur at set times. Communication is limited and monitored. Inmates are assigned to housing units based on classification levels. These levels are determined by factors such as offense type, behavior, and security risk. The environment is regulated to maintain order. Behavior inside the institution is documented continuously. Officers record compliance with rules. Any violations are processed through internal disciplinary systems. These systems operate separately from the courts but follow defined procedures. Reports are written. Hearings are conducted. Sanctions are applied when necessary. The goal is control and consistency. Access to programs depends on classification and availability. Educational and work assignments are offered within limits. Participation is voluntary but monitored. Performance in these programs can affect internal status, though it does not alter the sentence. Records are maintained for all activities. Documentation is a central component of the system. Communication with the outside world is restricted. Visits are scheduled and supervised. Phone calls are recorded. Written correspondence is screened. These controls are standard across facilities. They are designed to balance institutional security with limited personal contact. The structure does not change based on public attention or case history. Appeals are filed through the legal system. Defense attorneys challenge aspects of the trial and sentencing. These appeals are reviewed by higher courts. The process is formal and can take years. Each claim is examined against the trial record. Decisions are issued in written opinions. The original conviction remains in place unless a legal error is identified. Inside the facility, routine continues regardless of external developments. Days are repetitive. Rules are enforced uniformly. Staff follow established protocols. Inmates adapt to the structure over time. There is no variation based on the nature of media coverage or public interest. The system operates independently of external narratives. The case remains part of public record. Documents, transcripts, and evidence are archived. Researchers and legal professionals reference these materials for analysis. The interrogation footage, in particular, is studied for its procedural aspects. It shows how investigators manage evolving statements and maintain a controlled environment. The earlier observation of calm behavior during questioning is placed in context. Within the legal process, demeanor is secondary to evidence. The system requires verifiable facts. Statements are compared against data. Consistency is measured. Outcomes are based on alignment between explanation and proof. This framework is applied uniformly across cases. Over time, the focus shifts from the individual case to the broader function of the system. The investigation, trial, and incarceration follow established pathways. Each stage has defined rules. Each decision is documented. The process is designed to limit ambiguity and ensure that conclusions are supported by evidence. The case demonstrates how initial impressions can differ from final determinations. Behavior observed in an interrogation room may draw attention, but it does not resolve the case. Only through structured analysis and legal procedure does the system reach a conclusion. That conclusion, once established, carries forward into long-term confinement. The final stage of the case exists within long-term confinement and record. The legal process has concluded at the trial level. Appeals continue through higher courts, but the conviction remains active. Each filing is reviewed against the original proceedings. Written opinions address specific legal claims. The standard is narrow. Only procedural or constitutional errors can alter the outcome. In this case, the core findings of the trial are upheld. Inside the prison system, time is measured in routine. Schedules do not change. Movement is regulated by count times and security checks. Housing assignments are maintained unless behavior requires adjustment. Records are updated continuously. Every action is logged. This documentation forms a permanent institutional history. It follows the inmate across any transfer within the system. The environment is controlled by policy. Officers enforce rules without reference to the details of the original case. The system separates the individual from the narrative that brought them there. What matters is compliance with regulations. Infractions are processed through internal discipline. Reports are reviewed. Sanctions are applied according to established guidelines. The process is repetitive and standardized. External attention to the case does not affect daily operations. Media coverage rises and falls over time. Public interest shifts to new cases. Within the facility, the structure remains constant. Communication channels stay limited. Visits are scheduled. Calls are monitored. Mail is screened. These controls are applied uniformly. They are not adjusted based on notoriety. Legal teams continue to file motions when grounds are identified. Each motion enters a formal review process. Courts examine transcripts, evidence, and prior rulings. Decisions are issued in writing. Most filings do not result in changes to the sentence. The threshold for reversal is high. The original findings, supported by forensic evidence and documented inconsistencies, remain central. The interrogation that began the public focus on this case is preserved as part of the record. It is used in training and analysis within law enforcement and legal fields. The value lies in procedure. Investigators maintained a controlled environment. They introduced evidence methodically. They allowed statements to develop and then tested them against facts. The outcome did not depend on demeanor. It depended on verification. Over time, the case becomes an example of how the system processes complex evidence. Digital data, forensic analysis, and recorded statements are integrated into a single timeline. Each element is tested independently. Consistency across sources strengthens the conclusion. This approach reduces reliance on subjective interpretation. It emphasizes measurable proof. The earlier observation of calm behavior during questioning is understood within this framework. It is noted, recorded, and considered. It is not decisive. The system does not assign guilt based on expression or tone. It requires alignment between claim and evidence. In this case, that alignment does not exist. The shifting narratives are documented. The physical evidence remains unchanged. The long-term outcome is defined by the sentence and the structure that enforces it. Life without parole means there is no scheduled release. The system manages the individual within its established rules for the remainder of the term. Reviews occur only within the scope of legal appeals or administrative requirements. There is no variation in the core conditions. The case concludes not with a single moment, but with a continuation of process. Records remain accessible. Procedures remain in place. The system continues to operate in the same way for each new case that enters it. The details differ, but the structure does not. Evidence is collected. Statements are tested. Courts evaluate. Facilities enforce sentences. What began with an interrogation marked by unusual calm ends within a system that prioritizes consistency over perception. The focus remains on what can be proven. The result reflects that standard. The process, from investigation to incarceration, follows defined steps that do not change based on appearance or reaction. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.